This week on the Steele Report.
When I was out in the district talking to folks, people are thirsty for more options on the ballot, and they feel like the two-party system has failed us. So I think it's going to go in my favor.
And that's why independent 2nd District Congressional candidate Jody Puffett believes she will have an influence in this key Iowa congressional race. And our program begins right now.
Now from KWWL, this is the Steele Report.
Well, right now I'd like to welcome to the Steele Report for the first time another one of our congressional candidates in this area, and her name is Jody Puffett. I'd like you to meet her right now. This is in the 2nd District, and Jody is running as an independent candidate.
That is correct.
She's a native of Eastern Iowa community of Edgewood, now lives over at Lake Delhi. Ms. Puffett is a UNI finance graduate, a tax and risk management and audit expert, retired from Transamerica, the huge insurance and risk management retirement company based in Cedar Rapids. Married for 36 years to her husband Jeff, 6 children and 6 grandchildren. So Jody, you obviously have had a very, very busy life. And I'd like to ask all of the candidates that come on the show, why run now? What is your motivation for running, particularly as an independent? There wasn't even an independent on the ballot here the last time when Liz Mathis and Ashley Hinson went head to head.
Yep, absolutely. So I'll give you a little bit of history so you have more background. So the 6 children that we have, 3 of our kiddos are a sibling group we adopted out of foster care back in 2012. And you mentioned my husband is a U.S. Navy vet. We have an adult daughter who is a special education teacher in a public school here in the 2nd District. And we have a daughter who works at a pediatric mental health hospital in Des Moines. And so I am very passionate and heavily involved in mental health issues.
So one of your passions obviously is the mental health part of this big puzzle. But again, let's get back to why are you running though?
So the final straw, I've actually been following Ashley Hinson for quite a while, and I've been kind of disappointed in her performance in Congress and her voting record. The final straw for me came when she voted yes, along with our other 3 representatives and 2 senators, to the $95 billion foreign aid package in April. And why that frustrated me so much is we continue to send hundreds of billions of dollars to other countries when we're not taking care of things in our own backyard.
My husband and I.
Now recently you attended this League of Women Voters Candidate Forum in Waterloo at Hawkeye Community College, the Van Miller Center there downtown. Democrat challenger Sarah Corkery was there, and also incumbent Republican Ashley Hinson appeared, but via video, as she was still out in Washington, D.C. So I watched the recording, and you seem to focus on many of the same issues that you've mentioned here today.
And quite frankly, I am fed up with our federal government and their lack of financial responsibility and accountability. And I'm also frustrated with Ashley Hinson. But while Ashley Hinson was voting yes to send $95 billion to other countries, back here in our own backyards, we have significant needs that aren't being met. And I can say this because I know it personally and I'm living it day to day. We are not supporting our veterans. We are not supporting our foster care system. We are not supporting our mental health community. And we are not supporting our teachers in education. And my whole goal is to get to Washington, fight the status quo, and support cutting wasteful spending, spending to other countries unless it's an absolute need, putting first and foremost the needs of Americans and those in this district.
Just as a casual viewer in all this, it looks like you're targeting the current incumbent Republican member of Congress, Ashley Hinson, and so you're going to try to take votes away from her, which then could potentially, just theoretically, opens the door for the Democratic candidate. I thought you were a Republican.
Well, you know, I was a Republican, and that's kind of how I ended up being an independent, is that vote was in April. And by the time I decided, and I'd been thinking about it for a year, by the time I decided I was going to run, I had missed the deadline for the primary. So I had lots of conversations with family and friends, and I said, okay, what do I do here? I think I'm going to run as an independent. And I had a lot of people tell me, you know, just wait 2 years and run in the next primary. And I'm like, no, my gut's telling me this is the year that people will vote for change. They're so tired of the polarized political system that we have today on both sides of the aisle. And amazingly, as I've been out getting signatures, which we turned in August, so to be eligible on the ballot, when I was out in the district talking to folks, people are thirsty for more options on the ballot, and they feel like the two-party system has failed us. So I think it's going to go in my favor.
So when you think about taking votes away from Ashley Hinson or even Sarah Corkery, the Democratic candidate, what is your goal in this? You know you probably don't have any chance of winning, right?
Well, you know what?
I'll probably get criticized for saying that,
That's
but
okay.
I try to be realistic.
My own parents have said that, so you're okay.
But, I mean, are you looking to get 2, 3, 5%, or what do you think?
You know, I honestly am hoping that I win, and I know that that is an uphill battle, and we have a lot of headwinds. But, and again, what I'm hearing in the district, and I'm retired right now, so I'm not in this to build a political career. Right, I'm in this to get in there and get some change made, and then to get out back to my kids and grandkids. But what I'm hearing in the district is people are really tired of the two-party system. So I have good hope there.
So you're trying to make a statement in a roundabout way, or actually maybe a direct way, that says we need change.
Yes.
But as a member of Congress, would you be able to be someone who could make that kind of change? If you were, say you're on one side or the other, you're an independent candidate, so you answer to no one basically then, huh?
Well, I answer to no one, and so that's the positive, right? I don't have to toe the party line or the party platform. I can vote the way I feel is best, and the way that the individuals of this community are telling me they want me to vote, without having to be concerned about, you know, well, I want on this committee, or I want this leadership position in the political world, because that's not my end goal. My end goal is truly to shake things up and make some change and some noise.
Okay, well, let's go down some of the issues. Obviously, one of the key issues on the Democratic side, and Sarah Corkery made that very clear when she made an appearance here a few weeks ago, reproductive rights. So where do you stand on that?
So whether you agree with it or not, the Supreme Court has said, you know what, this is a state issue. So having said that, and I know this is a very passionate issue for Sarah, but having said that, I'm happy to give my views. I'm in the middle. So I'm running against two opponents, who one is pro-choice all the way up through the point of birth, and another one who has signed a federal bill and voted yes that she completely banned abortion without exception. Now I do think Ashley now has said, you know, she would agree to some some exceptions. So I need to make that clear.
She has said on this show actually 2 or 3 years ago even that she does favor exceptions. Okay.
So I'm in the middle. I wholeheartedly believe women need abortion options early in their pregnancy. And no judgment on my part in that, regardless of my own personal beliefs and whether I'd have an abortion or not. But I do believe women need those options. Having said that, if a bill were to come to the floor that said completely pro-choice all the way up through the point of birth, I would veto that as well and vote no. I find it barbaric that we get to that stage. And again, I'm setting aside medical issues, fetal abnormalities and things like that. Those are a given.
Okay, on the border issue, I think you've commented on that before. The border crisis is a crisis as you see it, or what should be done?
I do think it is a crisis. I do think it is a crisis. I fully support legal immigration. There are individuals who want to come to this country and make a better life for themselves and be productive members of society, and we absolutely need to have a process that's quicker to get them a path to citizenship. But right now, I do believe we have an open border, and we do have criminals who are coming through that border, and terrorists. And I do think we need to close the border down a little bit stricter and have a better vetting process for those individuals coming into our country.
Now there's the Republican side of you coming out there, okay? Are you in favor of extending the wall or building the wall, so to speak? I call it the wall, whatever you want to call it.
Yes,
now,
I am. Yep. I absolutely am.
Now you said you were against the big aid package, the $95 billion.
Yes.
So as far as money to countries like Ukraine, when does that end, or where do you stand on that? Is there a certain point where you say, listen, this is not going anywhere? What is your viewpoint on that? I
would have said no more before the $95 billion package, right? And part of it is, and I know part of that package was weapons in addition to cash, but I honestly believe we're sending these hundreds of billions of dollars over there, and I'm coming at it from a CFO perspective and from our auditor perspective. We have no transparency and accountability into how those dollars are being spent. And I would wholeheartedly support our allies, and I do believe we need to do that. But I firmly believe that we need to take care of our own backyard first, and that's where I have an issue with it too.
And what about the aid to Israel? Where do you stand as far as Israel and its fight against Hamas and that ongoing war? Still trying to come up with some kind of,
my goodness.
At least a ceasefire.
Yep. I wholeheartedly believe Israel has a right to defend itself, and I would support anything they need to do to defend themselves. I just believe, and candidly, we're funding both sides of the war right now, a little bit, right? At some point, we need to stop funding the war and just being there from a support perspective.
Unless they're going to help win the war.
Unless,
right? I mean, should the United States be doing more or not?
I don't think so. I think we have enough issues right now in our own country that we need to be securing our borders and making our country safe before we worry about the other countries.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your economic plan, or an economic plan that you would be able to support. And I think Vice President Harris's plan, that she's calling it right now, is the opportunity economy.
Yeah.
Do you know what that is, or would you support that?
I haven't. Honestly, the biggest thing I know that she's been proposing is the tax on unrealized capital gains, which I absolutely do not support, and we can talk about that.
I was going to say that's one that would be right up your alley as someone who knows all about auditing and risk management. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why would that?
Absolutely. So since I've worked for an insurance company, insurance companies have huge investment portfolios. And the challenge I have with the unrealized gains, we had to report that from a regulatory standpoint, but unless that investment is publicly traded, the debate will come down to, how do you value that? How do you value a piece of real estate? How do you value an investment in a partnership? How do you value an investment in a startup business? And so what's going to happen is that the IRS will have to create an administrative department around investment valuation, which is going to be a huge cost. And candidly, I think a lot of it might even be outsourced. You're talking about people like, or the companies like BlackRock that are going to benefit from that, right? Because now you've got the government going to them saying, help us value these so we can challenge the taxpayer. It's just not a path we want to go down at all.
I mean, if it's called unrealized profit or gain, isn't it unrealized?
It's unrealized. So the markets could go, so your typical taxpayer, the end of the tax year is December 31st. So let's say on December 31st, the markets tank, and all of your taxpayers have unrealized losses. They could go up 2 days later, and those unrealized losses are gone. So yeah, unrealized, very volatile, would be very volatile from a revenue perspective, and so it'd be really, really hard to balance a budget with that.
And what about jobs? I noticed the job creation, the report that comes out on a Friday usually gets readjusted later, and usually it's adjusted down. We overestimated how many jobs are created. How do you create jobs in this country given the current economic conditions? With inflation, though, the rate of inflation down, prices, though, still way, way high.
Well, and inflation, candidly, the best thing we can do to fight inflation is the government needs to quit spending so much money. I mean, that's the bottom line, and our debt is out of control. I would actually be a fan of, if our debt got to be a certain percentage of GDP, that there is a requirement. Now, this would require an amendment to the Constitution, right, or a law, but that Congress has to put into the budget for the next several years until they get it below that percentage, that they're going to continue to pay down the debt. So that's one thing is, federal spending has got to come down. Our debt has to come down.
I think we're at 34 trillion right now, something like that.
Yep.
Do you actually believe that anyone has any hope of ever getting that paid off? I look at that and going, I don't think anybody wants to pay it off.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I don't think right now anybody on either side of the aisle, right? Nobody is interested in paying down that debt, and we're going to pay for it. We are going to pay for it. It will catch up with us at some point. I think what needs to happen, and quite frankly, Congress they're the branch that is responsible for budget and spending, and we just need some backbones in Congress to do some real serious cuts to our spending.
Okay, we're going to take a short break here on this week's edition of the Steele Report and talk more with 2nd District Independent Congressional candidate, that's Jody Puffett. More from Jody coming up here after this break.
Thanks.
And welcome back to this week's edition of the Steele Report. My guest is 2nd District Congressional candidate, Independent candidate, Jody Puffett. And Jody, one of the key issues that you mentioned in the first segment was the mental health issue.
Yep.
And you, from your viewpoint, Iowa is drastically, and the government, the federal government also, both the state and federal governments, drastically underfunding
Right.
this type of treatment that is so necessary for so many young people and adults too. Yeah.
Yeah, and mental health actually, it impacts only the young folks, so kiddos in foster care, but just kiddos that have mental health issues, but it also impacts our vets as well. I think we've got some real serious gaps here in Iowa, and a lot of that I think is driven by shutting down a lot of our state facilities several years ago. I will share, and I've never publicly shared this before, but the 3 adopted kiddos we have, they do have some mental health challenges and some trauma-related issues. We actually have a daughter who's in a mental health facility in southern Missouri, 8.5 hours away, simply because there's just not enough facilities here in Iowa.
Right.
So, you know, it's a crisis. Our mental health situation is an absolute crisis. And having been involved in the foster care system as well, when you have kiddos that have trauma early on in their life, early intervention is key, because one of 2 things is going to happen, right? They're either going to get the help they need and the support they need for the long haul, because it's not just in a year you're better, or they're going to go down a path of either drugs or end up in the criminal justice system. And so I think it's a vicious cycle we get in, and so I am a huge advocate. We've got to put more dollars to work and more support to work early on for intervention.
What is the other key issue you're looking at right now? If you were a member of Congress, as a freshman member, which would have very little power,
Yep.
What would you try to push for to help Iowans, and maybe particularly the ag economy, with the Farm Bill still stuck, hasn't even taken any effort in the Senate yet? So, you know, what about the Farm Bill and some other issues that you're concerned about?
So I actually have a son-in-law who farms a multi-generational farm, and he and my daughter have 3 boys under the age of 4, and so my biggest issue is I want to protect the family farms. That is critical for me. I can tell you my 3 grandsons, they already are full-blown farmers through and through. It's in their blood, and I want to make sure that those farms are there for them to take over later. You know, the other issue outside of mental health, honestly, it's the finance person in me. It is, we have got to be more financially responsible at our federal government. We've got to take a look at our expense base. We've got to take a look at our debt. And honestly, I think that it's going to be some serious cuts that need to be made, and those types of changes never come easy, but it really has to be done.
And I know that you have mentioned on other interviews, I believe, that you are in favor of term limits, but also there's an added bonus if you would be elected, right? What would that be?
I have committed, and again, as I've stated, I'm not in this to build a political career. I truly am in this to affect change in Washington. And I'm a true believer in putting some skin in the game when you make commitments like that. And so I have committed that if I'm elected, I will donate my first year's salary to nonprofits here in the district.
Well, that's a nice gesture. I mean,
Thank you.
that might be enough to put you over the top.
Well, you never know.
You know, let's talk a little bit about that, because you are in the area, your company is huge in retirements,
Yes.
retirement accounts. What do young people, young couples, young families need to do now to secure their futures, just given the fact that the government spending probably is not going to slow down? What do they need to do as individual families to prepare for that day?
You know, honestly, it is really about being disciplined in your early years when you're first starting out, and committing to putting away so much money, whether your company has a 401k, even if they don't have a match, at least you're setting aside dollars for your future. So I would say that's the biggest thing that folks can do is, you know, be disciplined and commit to those retirement accounts.
When you look ahead at what's happening in our country today and all the rhetoric and the divisiveness and everything, how do you curb that? And is it a social media problem? How do you view where is the biggest problem originating?
Well, you know, I'm gonna put blame on both parties right now, right? Because I think we've got so much finger pointing going on, and we've got so much polarization going on. I'm a true believer. I don't have time for that nonsense, right? I'm fix it. What do we need to do to solve the problem? And don't come to me with problems without a proposed solution. So the biggest thing that I would do is say, I don't have time for this nonsense. You know, give me something tactical, give me a solution to the problem, and then, you know what, rally everybody around to make that happen.
You know, people are very quick to criticize, but rarely seldomly do they say this is how we, or at least this is an idea that we should look at, isn't
Right.
it? I mean,
Yep.
the problems out there are very complicated. There's no
They
doubt
are.
about it.
They are.
And there just seems like no one's willing to budge on either side.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And you know, you can't boil the ocean, right? As you mentioned, we've got a lot of very, very massive, complex issues going on in this country right now, and we're not going to be able to boil the ocean in a year or 2 years. But I think the biggest thing we need to do is set the tone that the rhetoric needs to change, and we need to start solving problems.
Well, you mentioned the ocean, so is climate change a priority for you, or is it something that, how do you feel about the climate issue? Yeah.
So I'd say I'm in the middle of that again. I don't believe that cow farts, frankly, are causing climate change. But however, I don't believe that we're not impacting climate. I do believe we are. For example, me personally, my laundry soap does not come in a plastic jug, right? I buy the sheets that have the detergent in them, and so there are lots of things we can do as individuals to help the environment. And that's where I think it starts.
But you're not willing to say we're going to be all gone in 12 years or something like some people have predicted,
No.
right?
No.
Imagine climate change has probably been going on since the day the Earth was created, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, yep.
And then as you look ahead in your campaign, where do you go from here? After this interview, what are you doing to kind of rally the people who are out there kind of on the fence, looking at maybe an independent this time? What do you tell them? How do you get them to come to your side?
You know, honestly, as I mentioned, and I'm just going to keep doing what was successful when we got our 1,726 signatures, and that's really boots on the ground, going to people where they are and talking to them. I think a lot of the issues that are very passionate for me, everybody, regardless of their political party, can agree with those. There's nothing in my goals that is going to be controversial. Who would argue against supporting our vets or mental health issues? So I'm going to continue to do that. I'm doing interviews like this, but I'm also doing meet and greets at coffee shops, going door to door, you know, old-fashioned grassroots type of stuff.
So military veterans really need our support.
Yes.
And where do you stand as far as the Defense Department gets more money than a lot of the nations combined in overall spending, don't they? So where does that go then? Yeah.
You know, honestly, I think part of it is that the right dollar amount? You have to look at it. Do you need to really throw more money at it? Or do you need to look at how the dollars are being spent right now and how much of those dollars that are being spent are actually wasted or not necessary? I have worked hard to get out and communicate with the vet community. The Freedom Foundation in Cedar Rapids is one where I went. You know, we truly do, whether we'd like to admit it or not. We have vets in this community who do not get enough to eat. We have vets who are homeless. So we need to make sure, I truly believe our vets need to get concierge service, right? Their sacrifice to our country, they should be number one. But again, putting on my finance and auditor hat, the dollars we're spending, where are we spending those? And is it an efficient use of those funds?
I think one thing that really bothers people is the tax system that we have is so complicated. What would you do? What do you think we should do as far as income taxes in America? Yeah.
So a couple things. One, I actually have my master's in tax. I know that's very geeky, but I do. And I would separate out individual income tax from corporate income tax. So let's just talk about individual income tax here for a minute. So one of the things that I truly believe, and it's very simple. If you have to hire somebody to do your taxes, our taxes are too complicated. So, you know, I've got a lot of other things that I want to focus on, but one thing I would really like to focus on as well is simplifying our tax structure. It's just gotten way too complicated. If you've ever read the code and regs, it's not an easy read. But again, you should be able to sit down and file your own taxes without having to hire somebody to do them.
Okay. And what other key issue, before we go, we're kind of run out of time here shortly.
Sure.
What's on your mind right now as you look to move your campaign forward? What is your message about why you're the candidate, even though you're running as an independent against two strong candidates, both on the Republican and Democratic side?
I would say the biggest thing is I think my background professionally gives me a great leg up here to be effective in Washington from a spending perspective. But I also believe I truly am in the middle with a lot of where my policy positions are. And I actually wear purple because it's a combination of red and blue. So I've got 34 years of bringing people together and teams together to make things happen, and that's what I'd like to do here.
Okay, Jody Puffett, congressional candidate in the 2nd District, independent candidate. You got enough signatures to get on the ballot.
I
So
did.
Your ballot will be there. Your name will be on
My
that
name will be
ballot
there.
in the
Yeah.
first week in November. So thank you very much for taking the time
Thanks
to
for
come in. I
having
really
me.
appreciate that.
All
We'll
right.
wrap things up here on the Steele Report in just a moment. Thanks again to 2nd District Independent Congressional candidate Jody Puffett for being on today's program. More candidates are on our schedule as we get closer to Election Day. Thanks for watching. See you next week.